Good afternoon. On behalf of KUKA.ArcTech, we'd like to thank everyone for joining today's webinar, Accelerate Arc Welding Capabilities webinar. Our two speakers today are Keith Dunham, Welding Application Specialist, and Charlie Adams, Business Development Manager for Tier 1 of Metals. If anyone has any questions, please type them in the questions box, and our speakers will periodically stop to answer questions. The webinar is being recorded, and it will be live on our website and YouTube in about 2 weeks after the webinar. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith. I hope everyone's doing well today. As Austin said, I'm the application specialist for arc welding with KUKA Canada. I'm new to the company, but I do have many years experience in fabrication, production, manufacturing, but the whole robot OEM is a new thing, but so far has been going very well. My responsibilities at KUKA are to maintain our lab. We have a small lab currently in renovation, 2 robots, 2 positioners, is capable of steel and aluminum welding. We will develop customer demos, customer product development, pre and post sales support that are related to arc welding. Today is going to cover mostly the ArcTech basic software. I do touch on some of the other option packages, as you can see in the overview, but there will be later more detailed presentations on those. So ArcTech Basic is an option package from KUKA that gives you the basic functionality needed to start welding. It's a necessary option package needed to install future packages. You're able to program simple welding tasks, fast programming with status keys or easy teach keys. I touch on them a little later on. Configuration of many power sources, and you're able to weave functions with basic. You get into advanced, there are more options. The nice thing about ArcTech Basic is it creates the inline forms for you. There's no complicated programming. You have an arc on. It programs it for you, an arc switch, arc off. Within the arc on, you can select ignition parameters, weld parameters, weave parameters. An arc switch is if you're going to change direction or change a motion, you would use that. You have the option of configuring weld parameters, weaving parameters, and then your arc off or your arc end is for your crater parameter. In each of those parameters, this is what on the smart pad, what the inline forms would look like. This is what you would open to adjust all your different parameters. Each parameter that's set at that motion or command is applied until the next motion or the next command happens. So whatever you have put on at your arc on will continue until either your arc switch or your arc off, and then those parameters will oversee the existing parameters. Even with velocity, you can change the velocity with those as well. Once you open those windows, this is based on Fronius job mode. Obviously other power sources would have different options. You have your mode is job mode. You can select your job number. And if you have any parameters set, you could call them. Wait time after ignition is the time you can set before before the robot begins to travel once the ignition arc has started. And then obviously you have a pre-flow time, and then an on-the-fly gas pre-flow time, which happens prior. Your weld, use for your arc on or your arc switch, same thing, job number, your speed, and then your end crater, you can have your post-flow time, and then your end crater time, again, is how long your robot will sit at that end before it will turn weld off. And if you have weaving enabled, your weaving parameter window comes up. You can adjust parameters there, and then your seam data. The seam data will be covered in future presentations. That's comes with ArcTech Advanced. This shows the two basic weaving patterns that come with ArcTech Basic. Obviously, there's no weaving, and then a triangle, a trapezoid. I think with Advanced, you get up to 8 pre-programmed, and 2 I think you can program yourself. So this is a few of the different features that ArcTech Advanced has over Basic. Like I said, the 8 predefined weave patterns, 2 you can define. You have on the fly activation, deactivation, where your robot will come down, I guess similar to a bird picking up a mouse. It just kind of swoops down, it'll start, and it doesn't have to actually go to that point to start. You can also configure a twin Fronius twin system with it, and then that's where your seam length monitoring that comes in. ArcTech Advanced is dependent on ArcTech Basic. TouchSense is another option package available. It's good for finding deviations prior to welding. Maybe deviations isn't the right word, shifted or moved parts prior to welding. If you were to have manually fit weldments, no jigger, no fixture, human error, TouchSense would move what you've programmed based on, again, the parameters that you had set for the motion for it to move. Obviously, a perfect part needs to be programmed in order for this to be successful, or the first part needs to be a perfect part programmed. ArcSense is another reliable solution that will compensate for irregularities in a weld joint as it's welding. It can be very beneficial. I have seen where ArcSense has done what it's supposed to do by following the path when a tack has broke and a part is shifted, similar to how this dotted line is what is the program path, but now these tacks have broken, so now it's going to follow that. So the robot does what it's supposed to do. It may cause a quality problem in the end, but that I guess it needs to be a consistent part coming to the robot. Next one is multi-layer. Multi-layer, I like this coming from a heavy from heavy equipment manufacturer. You just need to teach your root layer, and then all multiple layers or additional layers after that are all referenced by that root. You put in what offsets you want, which is what this parameter window is here. You can also change your layer direction. So you could have a start, your second pass could start on your crater, go back the other way, vice versa. If you do make changes to the root path after, all other paths are adjusted according to that. So that's kind of efficient. And KUKA offers a ready to pilot. This is, I don't know if you want to say, it looks like a kind of like a joystick, or I guess like the 6D mouse on the SmartPad. It allows you to manually guide the robot without use of the pendant. Maybe more of a hands-on feel. The next thing that I like, and I'm not sure if many people know about them, are the easy teach or the status keys. I think this is my favorite KUKA feature. It's their, I guess you could say they're like a shortcut key. Depending on what packages you have installed, obviously, or what status keys you have available. You can feed wire, retract wire, activate, deactivate your weld. You can do a dry run, so if your weld has a weave in it, the dry run will not weave, but it will still follow the path. Purge gas. And then you can also program your motions. So once you move to where you want, and you just hit one button and you've programmed that weld point or that air move. And you can also do your, you could program a weld with, in the matter of 2 or 3 pushes of a button, you could have a weld done. And if you are using a Fronius power source, it has allows you teach mode. And I'll talk about teach mode a bit in a further slide. So this would be an example of basic weld programming with the status keys. You push your button. Once you have your start where you want, then that creates your arc on. The next option to show is a switch. If you don't want that switch, you would just push again to get your off, and then you would have your arc on, your arc off. Or if you wanted the switch, you'd have your switch in the middle. And obviously these are all 3 linear moves, and then your weld's programmed. They are located at the bottom left, as you can see here. This is showing a window. This is from one of our lab robots. I just wanted to put in what the abbreviations meant. Maybe you could assume what they are, but obviously KUKA.ArcTech Basic, Touch Sense, there's no abbreviation. ARS, Arc Sense, and then ET, there's a Easy Teach, that's your any of your motions. And then if you had SeamTech tracking or SeamTech finding, you would have those abbreviations there. This shows the icons for many of the, I guess, just the basic features. What you have the options of, obviously your move symbol here, that's showing a PTP motion. Linear would be just a straight line like that, and a circle, or your circle auxiliary has the HP. Your ArcTech, you have your arc on, your arc switch, your arc off. This is hot welding. If you want to do, say, a run with no welding, this would be the symbol. We'll just have an X there, so it won't weld, but it'll do all the motions. Purge gas, feed wire, retract wire, and then this is if you did the dry run, so you would have no weaving motion. And the teach mode with Fronius, if you make any contact with the wire to anything electrically conductive, the wire will retract so you don't bend it, and then it'll maintain that stick out. Once you aren't touching that part, the stick out will go back to where it was. So that's kind of handy for online programming. Another feature that KUKA has, and it's not described as a status key or an easy teach key, but it is a useful shortcut, is the track mode. And track mode is in the jogging window on the top left, the squiggly line over here. It is allows you to move forward and backwards with the push of a plus or minus through a program path. Obviously, plus moves it forward, minus moves it backwards. So it makes it a little easier to kind of go back and forth through a path. We'll talk a bit about work visual. This is the icon that would be on your desktop if you did have work visual installed. It's free downloadable software. It is used to configure, program, diagnose KUKA robots. We'll talk a bit in this about just the welder power source configuration using work visual. This is the image of the work visual user face, an example of it anyway. With ArcTech Basic, you are able to configure many different power sources, as you can see on the right side there. This option is available. So in your catalog window, under options, this shows where all your tech packages are installed. And then once you expand on them, it drops down another menu. Within these tech packages are all the documentation too as well. All your manuals, licenses, release notes, everything. And then you would find what power source you're using, and you would take this, you would drag it over and put it in with your controller, and then that would give you your basic, allow you to configure that power source then with KUKA. So these slides are all to do with again, a Fronius. Different power sources are going to have different options, but this will show you mostly it's all the same, with just different, depending on the power source, different options. So under general, you have process settings, you have ignition air strategies, weld air strategies. You can select, this is where you can set, turn different functions on and off, change your tool direction, how many times, if there's an error, how many times you're going to try and restart, your timeouts for gas. If you have collision monitoring, you can turn it on and off in here. Obviously, this has ArcSense. You can go in and tell it what it needs to do when an error happens, how you want to handle that error. Ignition air strategies, you again come in here, set parameters that you want, how many attempts, how many seconds, fault distances, and then in your weld data, you can call these different strategies, and you can name them, what strategies you want to name them, and then call them in your ignition and in your weld data. So when that error happens, hey, do this. So you have different options there. This is showing 2 different modes, Fronius job mode and the synergic 2-step. And again, depending on your power source, your parameter sets will be different. These are all the default values that come in from the ArcTech basic, the drop down. Then you can go in and fine tune them, add, change, but they come in as a default setting, and then you just adjust them to your liking after that. You have your IO. Again, there's default numbers that come in. You can change them based on what configuration you have. The offset number and the address number are numbers that will do the math for you. If you want to put those IOs at a different number, you can change them. These are kind of the default ones. I think normally these come in at a 2000. We put them at a 1201, and then up from there, again, depending on your configuration and what you need, you can make those changes. And then data sets, again, job mode, characteristic mode, for ignition, weld, and end craters. You can change what job is going to be called, what to do after ignition, you know, your pre-flow time, what characteristic you're going to call if you're in characteristic mode, wire feed speed.
Hey Keith, can I interject real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a question a minute ago. I answered it, but I'm not sure if people could see it, so I just wanted to talk about it real quick. So one of the people asked, do you have to turn the dry run off to get the weaving back, or when you turn the weld back on, will it automatically go back to weaving? So I answered it, but I don't know if everybody could see it. Yes, when you turn the weld back on, weaving will turn back on. This is to, you know, ensure we're not making scrap or potentially, you know, causing problems maybe on your tooling. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. Okay, so data sets, ignition parameters, weld parameters, same thing. You go in, it comes in with default numbers. You can change those to what you want to change them to if you need to change them. And then your end crater or your end of your weld, you can set those sets and again call them. So with that being said, you would need a robot to weld. Though any robot can be used for arc welding, KUKA has a few that are commonly used. They obviously range in size, price, and capabilities. The Agilist, this little guy here, obviously doesn't have a large reach, but certain applications that would work well. Not a heavy payload, but with usually just a welding torch and a small hose pack or small bundle that is sufficient. The Cybertechs, these guys obviously have more of a reach. They do come with a inline wrist or a hollow wrist, which I'll explain a little more in the next slide. And then if you wanted to go with the IonTech, obviously you get a larger work envelope at 3100 millimeters, and then it does have a higher payload.
I'm going to interject once more real quick. We had a question about I/O, and I'm asking these questions while we're near it, just so we can talk about it. If somebody else has something, we can elaborate. So the question was, can we program all these values to variables and control them from the SmartPad, or what signals do we have access to map to I/O? So ultimately, all these values are already variables inside our system. You could pull them. You can do what you want with them. That is kind of the benefit of KUKA, is that it's open architecture. What we do is we build these inline forms to try to make it simple to normal level users. If you're doing a high level application like some of our customers, you can certainly dive way into it. And then you say, what signals do we have access to map to I/O? So as long as our device talks to whatever that device is and that is giving us signals back and forth, you can map it to that I/O. So let's say, for example, you have a gas sensor or a wire runout sensor. You could map that into the previous page of this, and you can actually set limits and things to say, if you see the runout, the wire run out, do not move on to the next weld, because I know I'm not going to be able to finish it. So yeah, thanks for the question.
So now the different wrist options, hollow wrist, obviously, hollow wrist and inline wrist, in my opinion, have, benefits or advantages, disadvantages. Hollow, you don't have the same amount of reach you would, but your hose pack is protected because it's through the arm. The inline, obviously, you get more of an extended reach, but you have an unprotected hose pack. For example, here, like your hose pack would be running down the outside of axis 4 there. Now, new to KUKA and an ease into the arc welding or automated arc welding is the Addition robot. It is a hollow wrist. It has a welcoming price point to get people, new people, existing people, into automated arc welding. The Canada lab is in the process of setting one up. We're still waiting to get it dressed, but there will be one here for customer demos and people to come see. And positioners are another beneficial piece, not a necessity, but they are an asset to any type of arc welding. They obviously increase weld quality. They position the weldment in a reachable weldable position, taking it out of, say, a vertical, putting it in a flat or a horizontal. They would reduce manual material handling, which reduces non-productive time, and they ensure consistent part positioning. There's a kind of a portfolio of KUKA positioners. Obviously, lots of options, should cover lots of applications. And around the world, KUKA has 11 tech centers in 7 countries, Canada being one of them. Different things are done at different facilities, validations, tests, processes, training. The KUKA Canada lab is, like I said, under a renovation. This is our spot welding cell, and this is our arc welding cell. The lab is primary function is for customer weld development, customer ArcTech training workshops, and just to showcase the KUKA option packages, all the different packages that KUKA offers. And I think with that, that's all I have. And I did have a question section here, but I don't have anything else. Are there any questions?
Yeah, it looks like we answered all the questions in the chat currently.
Okay.
We have Keith's information on the screen. In the next couple of days, we'll also be sending out a follow-up email. My information will be on there, so if you have more in-depth questions, one person in particular seemed to have some pretty specific questions. So, we would love to, catch up and make sure everything about KUKA that you can, specifically in this case, welding. And, however we can help, that's what we're here for. Whether it's in Mexico, US, Canada, we have labs. If your customers in Europe and you need help, making the push over here, we can obviously help that as well. And if you are looking to do development work or just in general looking to get some hands-on time at KUKA, specifically about certain applications like welding, we are open to it, and that's what our lab is for. So I see another question came in. How can I modify the bead length tolerance value? This is so that when you finish welding, you will not be alarmed because the length is shorter or longer. Okay, so inside of ArcTech Basic, there is a seam length monitoring function. This was developed around a couple of our tier 1 customers who say, hey, this weld cannot ever be shorter than this length and should never be longer than this length. If you need those tolerances opened up, you would just adjust it in that seam. So it's pretty simple to do. It explains it in the manual, but of course, if you get stuck, just give us a call. And then, I believe Austin said it earlier, but this is recorded. So yeah, if you want to see anything, it will be out on, I believe, YouTube in a couple of days or maybe a week or so. And then, it's there for reference.
Alrighty, thank you.
Let's see. There was one more question. We have more than one positioner and you want to activate one on time. How it can be done. Maybe I'll have to take that offline just to make sure I understand it. I'll get your contact info and I'll reach out to you about that.
Alrighty, it looks like I'll end the webinar. If there's any more questions, like you said, this contact information is up on the screen. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar, and this will be live on our website and on YouTube in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Industrial intelligence.